In the late 19th and very early 20th century, one of the best-selling and most highly potent drinks was an anise-flavored concoction traditionally made from ground wormwood, green anise, sweet fennel, and distilled in grape spirits. While it can be completely colorless, it's commonly depicted as light green and milky when water is added. It's called absinthe, named for its main ingredient, wormwood. And where there is wormwood, there is thujone. Thujone is a naturally occurring chemical in herbs like wormwood and oregano and can have psychoactive effects on the nervous system. However, especially in today's products, it must be consumed in very high quantities for it to manifest in any meaningful way in humans. Because there is such a low amount of thujone found in absinthe, a claim that it can cause hallucinations and convulsions is a far cry from the truth. But the drink is quite strong. Its alcohol content ranges from 90 to 148 proof, or 54 to 74% ABV. There was also a unique preparation for it. Traditionally, you'll use a slotted spoon laid across the top of your glass of distilled absinthe to rest a sugar cube on while you slowly drip cool water over it. You can use as much or as little water as you'd like, but it's always been recommended to use some sort of diffusion. Eventually, the sugar will dissolve through the slots of the spoon, and you can use the spoon to thoroughly mix your drink to serve. Because it contains sugar, it's not classified as a liqueur, but rather as a spirit, which is fitting, since it's been referred to as la fée verte, or the green fairy, in historical literature. It was an incredibly popular drink, especially among artists, writers, and artisans such as Ernest Hemingway, Oscar Wilde, Pablo Picasso, Edgar Allan Poe, and Aleister Crowley. But conservatives all over the planet considered alcohol as a whole a blight on moral living. As the Prohibition era rose to a rolling boil, particularly in America, a terrible crime perpetrated by a regular consumer of absinthe was the final nail in the coffin of a teetering million-dollar industry. The tragic event was dubbed the Absinthe Murders. It was 1905 in Switzerland. 31-year-old French vineyard worker and veteran, Jean Lanfray, had been drinking wine and other spirits quite heavily throughout the day, which wasn't unusual for him. Every day he would wake up, have a shot of absinthe, diluted with 3 parts of water, and leave for work or chores, leaving behind a wife and 2 young children to tend to their homestead on the upper floor of a farmhouse. But on this particular day in late August, he had visited the local bar before heading to work with his father and brother, ingesting a slurry of other drinks before and after working the vineyards. By 5 p.m., it was time to head home. Tired and drowsy from working and drinking all day, he became combative with his wife about trivial things. Nothing out of the ordinary for them as of late. But today was different. Today, Jean Lanfray would commit one of the most heinous acts of the early 20th century. Jean grabbed his rifle, prompting his father to plead that he rethink his actions. It fell on deaf and drunken ears, and Jean shot his wife in the head in the kitchen area. This alerted his eldest daughter Rose, 4.5, who ran into the room and was shot by her father. Jean then descended upon the cradle of his 1.5-year-old daughter and dispatched her as well. He then turned the rifle on himself. Because the rifle was so long, he attempted to rig up a string pull on the trigger, which botched the attempt. With a bullet lodged into his jaw, he grabbed his youngest daughter's body and cradled it while he lay in the hay in the barn. When the authorities finally arrived, he was dazed and incoherent, but alive. After having the bullet removed at a nearby hospital, he was taken to see the bodies of his victims. He was adamant that it couldn't have been him who did it, and that he would never harm his family. He persisted that he didn't remember anything that happened. While Lanfray was in custody, the community gathered to discuss what happened. During this time, they found out that Mrs. Lanfray was pregnant with a male child at the time of her death. In their despair, fear, and desperation for an answer to the senseless crime, they came to one conclusion. It was all the result of consuming absinthe. Within a week, over 80,000 people signed a total absinthe ban into local law. Soon, the rally against absinthe had been joined by a committee of Swiss doctors who concluded absinthe not only brought on anxiety attacks and hallucinations but would often leave the drinker looking ghostly and sickly. Although this wasn't the case with Lanfray, as he was a very fit and healthy young man, absinthe was used as a scapegoat, despite him consuming it the least of all his other favored types of drinks. After being examined in prison by the top psychiatrist in the region at the time, Dr. Albert Mahame, he surmised, without a doubt, It is the absinthe he drank daily and for a long time that gave Lanfray the ferociousness of temper and blind rages that made him shoot his wife for nothing and his 2 poor children, whom he loved. But although his defense attorney attributed the seemingly unprovoked attack to a mind fogged by absinthe, he was convicted of the murders and sentenced to life in prison. 3 days later, Jean Lanfray was found in his cell dead after hanging himself. Consequently, absinthe fell under a total nationwide ban by the country that had created it. Other nations, horrified by the tale of the absinthe murders, also banned absinthe. But were Lanfray's actions truly a side effect of consuming absinthe, especially in such small quantities? Was absinthe any more impairing when mixed with brandy, whiskey, or wine? Was it a combination of domestic stressors, PTSD, and alcohol that led to the destruction of an entire family? Historically, some have said it shouldn't be trifled with, but writer Ernest Hemingway has said it's a cure-all and likened it to the alchemy of the spirit and body. Whiskey, Hemingway said, does not curl around inside of you the way absinthe does. There is nothing like absinthe. Since that fateful day in August 1905, absinthe has exemplified a rocky roller coaster of bans, revivals, reconstructions, and renaissances. Today, absinthe is still enjoyed around the world, albeit in a more fabricated product. Cheap additives and sometimes toxic ingredients have replaced traditional processes in distillation, usually to achieve that desired taste and signature green hue. If you're able to legally obtain and enjoy absinthe, it's still quite a challenge to find high-quality brands because, at this point, it's easier to pass off sugary cold mixed cocktail spirits as the real thing. Nonetheless, we now have a good enough understanding of alcohol as a whole to know that anything ingested in too high of a quantity can lead to trouble. So should you find yourself hosting a visit from the Green Fairy, remember to not let her overstay her welcome.